Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Joint Board of Education meeting, Evanston Township High School, District 202, and Evanston Skokie, District 65. It's February 26, 2024. So welcome to all of you. And we'll start with District 65 as we start our open session.
I want to take the time to thank all of you for hosting us again. I always look forward to these joint meetings with both our districts, as we know all those children belong to all of us. And again, just looking forward to a really great meeting. Maria, can you do the roll call for it, please?
Present. Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Thank you. And can we have a roll call, please?
Here. 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 Here.
Here. Thank you. All right, so we'll open our meeting with comments from board. So I'll open it up to board and superintendents, and we'll start with District 65.
Again, I just want to welcome all of you to our joint board meeting. Again, I want to wish everybody happy Black History Month, as well as a belated Lunar New Year. And I don't know if you have any comments on behalf of our district.
Yeah, so I'm learning how to do this fancy stuff. This is really cool. I'm excited to be here to share and celebrate our successes this year with my colleague, Dr. Campbell. We've been really connecting this year, and so I appreciate all of the support that he's leaned in to give me in this current role that I'm in. And so I want to publicly thank my great colleague, Dr. Campbell, for doing an amazing job at mentoring me. So give it up for Dr. Campbell. In terms of celebrations for us, we have another great, exciting honor. I'm excited to say that one of my cabinet members received a very distinguished honor this last week, 2 weeks ago, about a week or so ago. Dr. Romy D. Cristofaro received the AASA Central Office Leader Award and was recognized in San Diego. And so I want to publicly just celebrate her and recognize her for all of the work that she does for our students, for our diverse learners, as well as our multilingual students. And so just excited to celebrate her today. It is the Lunar New Year, and so we're excited about that. And we've just had a great second half of the year, and so I'm just really grateful to have an awesome team of educators, leaders, and everyone really supporting and doing the work we need to do for the students in District 65. So again, just thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so from District 202, I'll start by just welcoming all of you to this meeting, to this space. Welcome to our home. I feel like we're definitely hosting, and I hope you have felt comfortable. Some are new. Welcome. Omar, I don't think we've had you here, so thank you. Welcome. Glad you're here. And it's just good to see everyone. And I look forward to some really good discussion this evening. We do this very rarely, but we recognize that we are in the same community, working with the same students. So this is by far not the only time that we have conversation. This is just one time that we speak, but we are talking a lot, and you'll hear more about that later. So welcome, thank you for being here. And any board members from 202, would you like to chime in? If not, Dr. Campbell.
Thank you, Madam President. And I'd just like to say welcome to the District 65 Board and 65 Administration, and also to my colleague, Dr. Turner, who's just been an amazing person to talk to, collaborate with, and even on a personal level, I think the world of Dr. Turner. we share a lot of connections being from the South Side. We got a lot of family connections as well that we discovered. And we also are just delighted to be able to have this conversation and be in collaboration with both of the districts. And let me just state that we are not in competition with one another, right? Our intention is to work together collaboratively to serve the families in Evanston and a part of Skokie. So that is our intention. And certainly we collaborate a lot, and we can always collaborate more. And but I am just really looking forward to an ongoing discourse and dialogue between the districts, the board, the administrations on how we can continue to best serve the students in this community. So thank you for being here, and we're always happy to host.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Wonderful. All right. So our first item tonight is comments from the public. And I think Dr. Bavis is going to do a little bit of an introduction.
Yes, I am. All right. So speakers who have signed up for public comment will be invited in the order that they signed up to address the board for up to 3 minutes. I will keep time and signal you at the end of 2 minutes as a courtesy. I will let you know the time is up, and in that event, should that become necessary, I will ask you to complete your thought or your sentence. Speakers are asked to come forward and speak at the lectern. Please state your name and address. Public comments generally pertain to school district matters, but comments about any individual are expressly prohibited. This means no names. Please understand that the Board of Education does not respond to public comment, but will listen carefully and will follow up as the board deems appropriate. All right. Our first speaker is Cornelius Mosby.
All right, so can you all hear me? So
Yes.
first of all, thank you all for allowing me to come up here and speak for a few minutes. I just want to say I have a tremendous amount of respect for educators, youth workers, anyone that's pouring into youth, because I feel like whenever you're pouring into youth, you're not just pouring into them, you're pouring into their communities, and you're literally helping to make this world a better place. So thank you so much. My name is Cornelius Mosby. I'm the founder of Super Self Institute, which is a social emotional learning program that helps young people tap into their superpowers so that they can become super leaders. For the past 4 or 5 years, we've impacted around 1,500 students in various capacities, such as group homes, middle schools, high schools, elementary schools, and I'm just so grateful that we were able to be on national television, radio, and I'm very passionate about the work that I do. And my passion for working with youth happened around 10 years ago when I was working at a treatment facility for at-risk youth. And there was this one client, his name was Billy Joe, not really his real name, but I'm calling him that to protect his identity. But just about every day when I would go into work, Billy Joe would physically attack me or staff, or he would verbally attack me or staff. And I couldn't understand why. Like, where did all of this aggression come from? And so I did some digging, did some research, and I found out that underneath all of that aggression was trauma, right? And so I found out that Billy Joe was neglected tremendously by his family. He was abused sexually, mentally, emotionally. So once I understood his story, I was able to empathize with him. And then empathy led me to be creative and innovative about creating trauma-informed practices that helped him tap into his coping skills, helped him understand what self-awareness was and emotional intelligence was. And I came up with creative empowerment techniques that helped him discover his superpowers, which eventually led to him becoming a super leader within his community. He was successfully discharged from this treatment facility. So I was inspired by Billy Joe's journey, and I was inspired by the work that I did with him, and so that's why I created Super Self Institute. And so I'm here today because I'm looking for a partnership with this district, and we have data that shows the effectiveness of the program. Deeply within our curriculum is trauma-informed practices, it's social emotional learning, it's everything that students need to navigate towards the positive side of the community. And one of the major things that separates our social emotional learning program from many other social emotional learning programs is the books, the journals, SEL for the teachers, but we're rolling out a new app. It's a comprehensive, holistic therapeutic platform aimed to providing educational and emotional support for the students, the teachers, and the parents all together. And so we're here, well, I'm here, and I'm willing to do a pilot program so that you all could get the gist of what the program is about. Thank you all so much very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Jack Jordan.
Hello, all. I'm Jack Jordan. I'm here from Climate Action Evanston. I'm the co-chair, and I'm here to speak in support of the sustainability policy that's before the board. I just want to say a quick thank you to the board for considering this, but especially to all of the past activists that have worked on this and other community members. If you're here and have worked on this policy in the past, could you just briefly stand up or are supporting this policy to show how many people we have here? We had a great event before this, too, with pizza. But I just want to talk a little bit about what's kind of before us here, and I have some key words that I think we need to all consider. The first is practical. This is a very common sense and practical policy that is before us. This isn't some progressive pipe dream. This is trying to prepare students for the future, and the future is climate change. And as someone who recently graduated Northwestern, who was a recent graduate of high school, the climate education that I've had the benefit of receiving has prepared me for the working world, has made me competitive and able to pursue a career that I want, but has really given me hope because I understand the climate crisis and I know what to do about it. And that is what this policy is doing. The second is opportunity and obligation. This is a huge opportunity before this board and this district. This would be the only third district in the country to have a policy like this, and we can really show some success among all of us in doing this. But it comes with a huge obligation because other districts from around the country are going to look to us in the way that we implement this, especially in the next 6 months to a year, to see if this is something that is actually reasonable for a school district to pursue. And the only way that we meet that opportunity is if we implement it correctly. And us activists here in Evanston, we've gotten a little smarter the last few years when it comes to implementation. We've passed things like the Environmental Justice Ordinance, we've passed things like the Climate Action and Resilience Plan, and have seen those things get a lot of progress in some ways, but also languish in other ways, and not seeing a lot of the deliverables that we wanted getting implemented. And so in order to implement this correctly, I think there's two things that we really need. We need accountability. We need accountability not only from this board, but for the entire Evanston community. This isn't just something that's on the shoulders of the leaders here at District 202. This is something that all of us, parents, teachers, students, community members, we're all invested in this. And I think it's on this board to remind us that this is all of us agreeing that this is a policy that we should pursue. And the last thing is honesty. We need to be very transparent. There will be times where we fall short. It's going to happen. But we need to make sure that we are clear with one another, honest with one another about what we can and what we can't do, and know that we should ask for help if we're running into issues, not covering it up and pretending that we're successful when we really aren't. That's not going to help anybody. This policy really gives me tremendous hope. It's given me tremendous hope working with these student leaders. They're so much further ahead than where I am, and I'm only a few years older than them. Just think of what this will mean for those students that come their entire Evanston Township High School career with this policy fully implemented. It's really, really energizing. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Marie Kabaya.
Hi, good evening. My name is Marika Bia, and I'm a D65 parent and an ETHS parent as well. I am a physician, and I work with Illinois Clinicians for Climate Action, and I'm currently co-leading efforts with Climate Education for Illinois to bring climate education to all K-12 students throughout the state. A few years ago, my then third grader told me that after school that she had heard that the world was going to end in 10 years. That broke my heart. And I realized that she had heard at that time about the IPCC report and interpreted it through the eyes of a third grader. The kids deserve so much more. They deserve a much better world than we're leaving them. So at the very least, we need to provide them with an education that gives them the tools to become the problem solvers that they need to be to deal with the changing world, to know what the career opportunities are in light of the changing green economy, to be in classrooms where a lens of equity and justice and environmental justice is used all the time in order to teach them how to become advocates for themselves and their communities.
2 minutes.
Thank you. To be in a place where there's a culture of resource conservation, to understand the health effects of the climate crisis on their bodies and how to mitigate those, and in a place that really is teaching by setting an example. To be in a campus that promotes biodiversity by feeding the animals that have been here long before us, and to not be just taught, but to be in a situation where they actually live the core principle that planetary health and human health are one and the same. So I'm always in awe of these students for their clarity, their determination, and their vision, and I applaud the staff members and the adults who have been supporting them. There are currently 2 bills in Illinois that are being proposed that will advance climate education in K through 12 schools, so more to come on that. So I just want to leave you with the words of Greta Thunberg, who said, "Instead of looking for hope, look for action. Then and only then hope will come." So I'm really looking forward to seeing this Green New Deal signed today, but more than signed, I'm really looking forward to seeing this implemented, hopefully with the urgency that my 3rd grader knew we needed 5 years ago. Thank you.
Next up is Eleanor Gogomo.
Hi, my name is Eleanor Gogomo, and I'm a leader at E-Town Sunrise, Evanston's branch of the National Sunrise Movement. I attended my first meeting this fall, and over the course of the school year, I've immersed myself more and more in the work and vision that Sunrise members across the country have for our future. As a 15-year-old sophomore here at ETHS, my future education and career are talked about frequently. But until I found Sunrise, I had barely talked about what kind of world there would be for this future of mine. With my longtime interest in climate change, I knew that the future was looking pretty bleak. But what were we doing about it? What could I, as one person, do about it? The seeming inevitability of unbreathable air, unbearable temperatures, undrinkable water, and uninhabitable cities made me more scared for my future than hopeful. The Green New Deal for Schools outlines a monumental transformation of our school systems that will help us face the climate crisis in an equitable way. It demands things like safe and clean buildings, healthy and locally sourced food, 100% renewable energy, and climate curriculum. It is the climate curriculum that stands out to me the most as the most exciting aspect of the Green New Deal for Schools. Last year, I took biology, and my teacher, Dr. Slayton, taught a unit on climate change, even though she wasn't required to. But she put in the work, and she went above and beyond because she knew the importance of young people to this issue. She helped me turn my interest in climate change into a passion, and I joined E-Town Sunrise the next year.
Minute 30.
With the policies in ETHS's Green New Deal, teachers like Dr. Slayton won't have to go it alone, and so many more students will have the chance to be inspired, like I was. I am honored and excited to be able to see the change that the Green New Deal for ETHS will bring to our school. I am grateful to the E-Town Sunrise members who have come before me, who didn't have the privilege of seeing what I am seeing today. I get to see the 3rd school district in the country pass the Green New Deal for Schools at my school. With this policy, I won't just have to ask, what can I as one person do? Because it won't just be me anymore. It won't just be E-Town Sunrise. It will be an institution
1 minute.
of over 4,000 people reducing its impact on the climate. It takes much more than just one person to help fight the climate crisis. And with this Green New Deal, we are reminded that we are not alone. So even though it's been said before, I want to say it again. Thank you to the Sunrise members who gave me a community and hope when I needed it most. Thank you to the school board for passing the Green New Deal for ETHS and helping not just my future look brighter, but every student who walks these halls for years to come.
Next up is Kristen Drabel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten Drehobel, and I am a Sustainability and Resilience Specialist with the City of Evanston. Thank you all for being here and listening tonight. First, I want to recognize John Crawford and the E-Town Sunrise for their work and commitment to sustainability at ETHS. My team has partnered with teachers, administration, and students on sustainability issues, and we look forward to continuing this work in the future. I strongly support the Green New Deal for ETHS and believe that it plays an essential role in Evanston meeting the goals outlined in citywide Climate Action and Resilience Plan. I'd like to highlight a few aspects of this policy that correspond with Evanston's climate targets. With climate emissions from buildings contributing to over 50% of Evanston's greenhouse gas emissions in 2022, new and existing buildings must rapidly electrify and become more efficient. Vehicle emissions made up a little more than 20% of greenhouse gas emissions in 2022 and must be addressed by fleet electrification and the expansion and promotion of walking, biking, and public transit options. A sustainable procurement policy is necessary to reduce consumption and waste and to align with the city's circularity goals. We look forward to working with ETHS on these goals and our own citywide goals as well.
2 minutes.
The Green New Deal for ETHS positions the school to be an example of a climate-forward school and to protect the well-being of students for generations to come. We must do everything that we can to protect people and planet. We must listen to the voices of our youth, and the City of Evanston Sustainability and Resilience team looks forward to being a part of this journey. Thank you all for your time.
That concludes public comment for this evening.
Thank you so much, and I just want to say to those who spoke, the board would like to acknowledge all of you. I know that we say that we won't respond, but we do listen, and we recognize that it takes your time. It's your time and all of you to come out and support what you believe in, and we appreciate that. Those who spoke had to prepare and maybe do something that is out of your comfort zone. So we appreciate the time that you took, and thank you for providing information to our board. So thank you. All right, so we will go on with our meeting, and we are at items for information. So we have a couple of really interesting reports ahead. The first one is forecasting the story of two districts, District 202 and District 65, focus and alignment. And I see a few people coming up to the table.
All right, well, welcome. I'm joined here by Carrie Levy, Donna Cross, Stacy Beardsley, and I'm Pete Bavis. And this is going to be the joint achievement report where we will have conversation across boards and among board members based on the data in front of you so that we can have that conversation and have that narrative. So I'll start this by saying District 65 and 202 are bringing forward this joint achievement report with the goal of sharing a broader range of data with our collective school boards. District 202 and 65 have a commitment to driving high levels of academic growth and achievement. In order to drive high levels of achievement, we are committed to our students' social well-being and supportive learning environments. It is our goal to provide information with our boards that provides a more holistic view of our students' expertise in academic gains with the goal of supporting continuous improvement within and across our districts. Yep, you can go. And you can drive.
All right. Thank you, Pete. Okay, so so a few headlines as we get ready to share the rest of our slides. So enrollment in District 65 includes a higher percent of students with individual, with IEP plans, are multilingual learners, and Hispanic Latinx students. Students indicate a higher level of connection to schools and educators at younger grades. We'll be talking about that. 5 Essentials survey data scores District 65 and 202 pretty high in the areas of safety, comfort, and respect. Attendance levels have limited racial predictability and exceed state averages across both districts. Grade point averages and attainment levels on state academic assessments, which for the purpose of this meeting, we will be talking about the IAR and the SAT, continue to show opportunity gaps by race and culture, and higher percentages of proficiency on state assessments are reported in the older grade levels in reading and math. Okay, so we are going to talk about our social emotional learning and well-being data first. So the data that we are talking about is survey data, student survey data. So District 65 administers the Panorama Survey in the spring of 2023. ETHS administers a well-being climate survey. The questions, we pull some questions that are from Panorama. They're exact same questions that are in District 65's Panorama Survey. So we have some data points that are the same survey questions asked of students around the same time frame.
So as you can see in District 65, around 67% of our students feel they quite or mostly feel like they belong at school, and about 56% at ETHS. And then when it comes to how they feel to connect, how connected they feel to adults at school, more than half of our students at D65 feel quite or mostly connected to the adults at their building, and about 25% at ETHS. So that's the most favorable responses, but also looking at between the 20 and 40% of responses that are in the somewhat or some category.
Okay, and we have some 5 Essential survey data in the report, so we won't go over that in addition. So next we have a few data points that we've pulled out to talk about equity in academics and attendance.
So in District 65 and District 202, they exceeded the state averages for attendance, and both districts have similar attendance trends across disaggregated groups. So in District 65, the average daily attendance was 92.8%. And then, of course, you can see the disaggregated groups breakdown there.
And then very similar in District 202 was 92.2%, and our patterns are similar to District 65's average daily attendance rate from last year.
Now we're going to move to grade point average, cumulative grade point average. And again, we see similar trends across GPA. So the GPA is fairly consistent across the 8th grades. This data for D65 is coming cumulatively from 7th and 8th grade, all subjects, so core and on-core as well.
So the high school, we are reporting average cumulative GPA for the class of 2023. This is what we report in our annual year-end review. So it's last year's seniors graduated. It's their final cumulative unweighted GPA. It represents GPA across all of the semesters that any student was enrolled at ETHS. That 2.8 benchmark across the state, at the high school, it's a benchmark that the state has as one of our college and career readiness measures and high school accountability. So we have that included as we keep an eye on how we are aligned with the state's benchmark that's in our accountability. And again, our patterns are similar across the districts. Right.
So now we're shifting to attainment outcomes. So for District 65, we're looking at the IAR, which is the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, which measures student mastery of grade level expectations. So each board has decided to process academic attainment and growth data a little bit separately, but we did focus on our state assessments across. So For reading, 44% of D65 6th through 8th grade students were considered proficient in reading on the IAR, which is higher than the state overall. And then you can also see the disaggregated groups by race, students' IEPs, free reduced lunch, and multilingual learners.
And at the high school, the SAT is our accountability measure in our Illinois report card. So this represents last year's ETH 11th grade, this year's class of 2024, their SAT proficiency in reading. And the ISB, the state's determination for what meets or exceeds proficiency, is actually higher than how the College Board cuts college readiness score. So the College Board's cut score for college readiness is lower than how the proficiency level that ISB is set on the same SAT. So this is our reading, English, language arts, and 53% of grade 11 students last year met the proficiency in reading above the state, overall state, and then you can see the differences disaggregated by our student groups, similar to same student groups as Donna just talked about, by race, ethnicity, students with IEP, free reduced lunch status, and multilingual learners.
Okay, now we're shifting to math. So 35% of D65 6th through 8th grade students were considered proficient in math on the IAR, which does beat the Illinois State overall average. So this means they are meeting grade level expectations and proficiency.
And then the SAT math for last year's, for 11th grade students, it was 44% of students overall that were considered proficient in math on the SAT, compared to the overall state 11th grade of 26.7%. And again, we have data disaggregated by our student groups.
And it's consistent across D65 and 202, about 9% difference for both.
Okay, so on our last couple of slides, we were gonna touch on post-high school planning, looking at developing our students to access post-high school opportunities with more success.
So in District 65, we do have an AVID course, yay. But in addition to AVID, all of our 6th through 8th grade students experience a curriculum and a series of lessons focused on college and career through our School Links platform. So one activity that all the students participate in is a career interest survey, which then leads them kind of down a path of discovery for what they want to do in high school and then what they want to do after high school. There's a scope and sequence as well as the classes. They're supported by both teachers with a heavy support from our guidance counselors. So the information you're seeing here is 1,540 D65 students participated in a career interest survey. And based off of that, here are the top 5 career groups that our students were interested in. And the larger of the pyramid, there's a lot of students that are really interested in that arts, audio, video, technology, and communications, followed by science and technology, health sciences, hospitality and tourism, and business management and administration.
And at the high school, we last year we had a career pathways fair in March 2023, and we had almost 1,000 students who attended the fair with 90 of our MEAC business partners. And then the circles around the large circle are all the different pathways. So it's all in small writing for, but it's several other ones that Donna referenced: arts and communication, agriculture, food, natural resources, human and public services, that were all, like, those are just a few that were represented. We also had an aviation career exploration day last year where over 1,000 students attended, and we had 20 local employers and business partners that participated at that particular fair.
And as a part of our career program, our seventh graders also participate in a career fair as well.
Okay, those are our highlights from the report. I'll turn it over to any questions.
Thank you for that report. Board, any questions? I think at one of your slides, Donna, you had 8th grade, but you reported that it actually included 7th and 8th grade. Am I correct about that?
Yes. So this is our 8th grade cohort from last year, 2023. In order to somewhat match what the cumulative GPA is from ETHS, we took their 7th and 8th grades cumulatively. We would have done 6th, 7th, and 8th, but at that time, we didn't have the data because we just got Power School last year. So it's those 2 years in order to kind of match the cumulative GPA for the seniors in 202.
Thank you. Just trying to understand that.
Yeah, there's just one cohort of 8th graders.
Okay.
I have a question, and thank you for your report. I'm looking at the student well-being data, and I have one question and one wonder. So my wonder is, what do we hope or want for our students? And I'm thinking particularly of the high school kids right now, and looking at 25% across all demographics, roughly, felt connected to adults. And so I'm just curious, like, what's our goal? And then also, I'm wondering about the item or a couple questions, and were they the ones where we asked, can you be yourself with your, with the adult in your building? Do you know what the question was that kids were being asked?
Can we flip back to that slide as well?
Yes. So, yeah. So the questions that are on here is the exact questions that were asked. There are additional questions as well. For example, there is one that says like how, it's actually almost the exact same question. Like, do you feel like you can be yourself at school, similar?
Yeah.
So, but these are the exact questions that are asked to the students. So, overall, how much do you feel like you belong at school? And then, how connected or how supported by the adults do you feel in your building? So that's kind of asked there. I mean, I think in the younger grades, our students have less educators than in the high school.
Oh, so you're saying you think it's more likely that they would then have a higher score because there are fewer adults to rate, if you will?
Yeah, so we do our panorama 3 through 8. So our 3rd, 4th, and 5th are also included in here, and they have one homeroom educator. So that's my theory, is that it might be because of that. But yeah, those are the questions that are exactly asked to students.
Okay, thank you.
3 through 8 is a pretty wide range.
It's a pretty wide range, yeah.
So it's really hard to get a good sense of, I don't know.
We do have these disaggregated by grade as well.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have it from 3rd, then 4th, then 5th, then 6th, and 7th, and 8th.
Okay.
But for this report, we put them together because that's what we look at as a school district.
Okay.
And 3rd through 4th was just added last year. We mostly just did 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in what happens as kids get older and wiser.
It's very similar to what we see in ETHS. It diminishes as they get older. I
Yeah.
have those numbers.
And I will say those numbers they kind of step up.
Yes.
And so it's not necessarily that they're high and then we move to middle school and they get a little bit lower. They kind of step up a bit developmentally as kids get a little bit older, and there's a good bit of experiential research around middle school that it's a point where kids at some points begin to feel less connected.
Sure.
And so that is where, like, we build our advisory program, we look for other opportunities, our family and community liaisons, things like that, to keep students connected to school. And so we're working to really reconnect kids.
And okay, so then just my last piece with that, because sometimes those questions can be, that's literally the question that is a very direct question versus, who can you be yourself around? But what do we want? Do we want to just look at the green and grow the green? Are we okay with somewhat? And and maybe it's not a question to answer right now, but I just am curious, whereas we have a state bar where we look at, we're above, we have it's a little bit more easy, I think, for us to determine the healthy academic field, but it's a little bit more challenging here.
Yeah, and I maybe want to speak to a little bit of that. We're taking a hard look at our methodology here at 202 and looking at our questions and trying to figure out what exactly do we really want to know and how do we want to ask it. We're looking at this idea of belonging, but also looking at mattering, all of the things. And so we are retooling a lot of our questions, and are even possibly going to break up other pieces of the survey so that we can now track by ID number and some other things, so that we can provide students the direct supports and response that they need. And I don't know if Dr. Levy wants to speak to a little bit of that, because you're doing that, in real time.
Yes, our students just took our well-being climate survey, and we took out a good chunk of this section so that we can revisit. We had a conversation back in November when I presented our year in review, and I shared this data. And so we've been looking at that, rethinking about it, looking at like what Dr. Campbell said, sort of the mattering, how do you feel valued? What does a culture of care mean? How do I get to that? So I'm hoping to come with some different, similar with some of these same questions, but something that's trying to get to it a little better understanding of what does it mean at the high school. We also are asking our questions after the summits, after our social consciousness series, so it lets us get to some more like how does this play into how you feel like you belong and you like mattered and valued, and your sense of belonging at the school. Just some ideas that we're working on for next year.
Just wanted to, wanted to thank you for, again, just giving us this comprehensive, holistic look at students and how they feel and how we're serving them. And then just getting back to this question, I have one of my kiddos here at ETHS, and then we had one of the young folks who spoke, who talked about a teacher that inspired them so much, right, to explore a certain interest, right? In this case, environment and climate, looking at climate change and resolving that issue. So, one of those pieces I think that we can try to dig into, everybody has that one teacher, right? That was a catalyst. Some people don't have any of those teachers. But, I remember that one teacher in 8th grade who, again, I feel changed my trajectory as a student. Because she saw me, so the question that Mira's asking, right, is like, okay, so who can I be myself around, or be my true self? That's kind of where we want to try to get to, is how can we create these systems where we have those experiences with not just one educator, but as many educators as possible, right? We think about the research around, educators of color, right, and how having, for instance, for black students, particularly black males, if you have one black teacher, your rate for college and career success goes up by triplets, and then more so that doubles when you see, somebody that's similar to your culture, throughout your educational career. So, looking at that research, right, and I know all our districts are jointly trying to work on, continue to diversify our workforce, and again, really trying to dig into how, again, ultimately, how that impacts our students and how they feel welcome and how they feel seen and how they feel whether they can be themselves or not, right? Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense. So it speaks to the need for curated experiences, right? It speaks to the need for mentoring, and we're pursuing those, and trying to be systematic about that. Freshman, sophomore, junior year, being very intentional. So more to come. But yeah, I think that's what we want. Because to echo what you said, Sergio, the two most important things that if a kid has a favorite teacher, and if a student can tell you what they want to be when they grow up, and it doesn't matter what that is, but if they can actually put that into words, then all of their academic outcomes post graduation, post high school, all that fall into place. Because no matter what that career path is, you have a plan, you have something you want, and you have someone you connect to.
One of the questions I've been asking at District 65, which I would like to be part of our conversation about the continuity of care across our districts, is how does this connect to our racial disparity in discipline data? That if we see our students getting more redirection, more being tripped up in our systems, and maybe even experiencing bias and racism with their educators, we know that the data tells us that belongingness is critical to academic success, right? And so we're making progress on our racial disparity around discipline, but it's certainly something that we need to keep looking at. But how can someone feel like they belong if all of the adult attention they're getting is negative, right? If they're being sent through systems that are not conducive to learning. And so I think this is something that I would want to see connected to our discipline data as well, to say who are the kids that are, if the kids who don't feel like they're connected to an adult and don't feel like they belong are also the ones that are experiencing so much of our disciplinary attention. I think that that's important as well.
I'll just add to that. I think some of the data that we'd want to see correlated, if we're assuming, right, that belongingness correlates to better learning and better academic outcomes, we'd want to see that correlation, right? If we are pouring resources into culture and climate and discipline disparities, do we also see outcomes in terms of academics, in terms of making expected gains in the learning that we want them to see, and to see a reduction in the racial disparities that we see across districts. I think there's obviously a lot of work still to be done, but I think starting to track those correlation would be really helpful, I think. Yeah.
I had a question about, you started the presentation by talking about impact and where there's impact. And we do have a number of programs in D65 that we've been talking about return on investment. And we have academic skill centers and AVID and guidance counselors, and all those things are meant to have an impact and change trajectories for students in certain ways. And are you able to, not just the two of you, but across systems, I imagine it's easier for 202 to look back and say, we know how kids are coming from different pathways and how they're doing success here. But I think we would like to look up and see, are some of the impacts that we've had maybe at our level sustainable in the upper grades? Are we able to do that? Do we have like the data sharing necessary to look back and forth and do those dives?
Yes, we have a data sharing agreement. We would just come together, have some research questions, agree on what it is that we want to look at, and could go forward with that.
So we could do those things like at D65 level and look back at them? Like how the kids who have had AVID for the past couple of years, like what their success rates look like in certain ways at the 202 level?
So we're currently tracking that data now. So students that are in ASCs, students that are in AVID, and since those just started, it's really nice to have like that initial baseline. And so we're tracking them across years. So we would be able to map them further with our data sharing.
And those two particular examples, though, those students have not yet matriculated into ETHS.
Correct.
But yes.
But we have, I mean, we're going to hear later, not to get ahead of the agenda, different academic pathways that are intended to, in math, impact what happens at 202. We're talking about dual language changes that will impact 202. So I think it's important, not just for the collaboration to continue, but for our ability to track, are those changes leading to success at 202?
Yeah, it's important for that long-term impact, the understanding of what we're doing now, whether that continues to have an impact over time.
So yeah, some of the interesting things we could do is, since it's all student ID, right? It's all tracked through student ID, all that data. We can look at zip code block extension, and we can actually match previous cohorts of students and see how they did. So we wouldn't have to wait like 10 years. We could probably do it in like, once they matriculate, maybe 3 or 4, once they're here.
Yeah, I think it would be great to be able to know what's a growing pain versus a problem. And if there's problems in the system, be able to fix it and dive into it. But I also know that those projects are overwhelming for your departments. So thank you.
I'm really happy to hear about some of the things happening on the college and career readiness front. And I'm wondering if there's even more that we can do from the perspective of exposing students to different career opportunities and just different careers that they could explore, especially at the middle school and high school level. And I guess my question is, how do you think about making the connection for students between what they're learning in the classroom and what they might want to do as a career. Because I know a lot of times students have a problem sort of connecting the two and seeing the practical application of the things that they're doing.
You know what's interesting? I have an anecdote. All right. So I was over working with, I was doing a site visit with Tom Ward Manufacturing, and he was like, we have this student, you know, he left U of I, but we have him. And I'm like, okay, that's great, and it's a manufacturing thing. I was like, okay. And he's like, and this guy pulled out an equation from high school and used it in their manufacturing plant to figure out a way to mass produce something. And he's like, this is the most important thing I've ever, it wasn't at U of I, it was in a math class here at ETHS. I learned how to do this. So we were like, oh man, okay, that's really, like, you never get that, right? You never get, like, you always get, oh, well, if you study your math, you could be an engineer or whatever, right? We never get the other way, where I learned this math concept in high school, and it literally not only changed my life, but improved the bottom line in a company. So I'm not going to give any names because those will come out soon enough, because we're going to celebrate that here in the coming weeks. But I wanted to say, like, isn't that amazing? And we want to, how do you intentionally do that? One is you have to be reflective, but you also have to be intentional as on the teacher side, right? You have to always make those connections. I think we're getting better at it. I don't think we're anywhere near where we need to be, but we're conscious of it. It's one of our district priorities is workforce development, post-high school planning. And, you know, we take a big tent on that. We say, we want you to do something after you graduate. What is it? Is it go right into the workforce? We have the Mayor's Employer Advisement Council. Is it get a certificate? We have some programs with Oakton that we've set up. Our basic nursing assistant training program is one of those. And just being intentional about those things. But I think, you know, we're also using School Links too. It was great to hear about School Links. There's a natural, seamless connection there. All of our students are on School Links. They're recording all of their work-based learning experiences on there. And they will be selecting courses next year using the School Links platform, which brings to bear all of that career readiness work as well. So lots going on there. But yeah, we're excited. We're really excited.
Great. Other questions? I was noticing just the academic GPA charts, and they're disaggregated by race, and it's the same pattern, and it's a disturbing pattern, you know, that we're still seeing some pretty significant disparities. The lowest achievement is the African American and Black students and the Latinx students. So, and that's across the board. I know we're going to talk about math in a little bit, but I just want to, we went quickly as we went through some of this information, but I just want to note that I just noted that in all of the reports for both districts, those patterns persist. And I guess that's one way of saying our work is still needed, much more, I mean, now more than ever, of course. We've come out, have we come out of that pandemic? Oh, I don't want to say that. But we are, I can say that we are pretty consistent back in our routine. And we're seeing these patterns persist. So it's more of a statement than a question.
Sure, and I think this pathway forward, taking this holistic approach, is another way. Because I think what we've done before as boards is just kind of sit on a distinct skill that kids can try to learn, be it like our former joint literacy goal, and we were stuck there for a while. And we sat there for a couple of years.
A lot of years.
A lot of years. And really, nothing was budging. We couldn't get our data together. So taking this comprehensive approach, looking at the root causes, right? Does a child feel like they belong? Do they have an adult that they feel comfortable with, or several adults in a school that they feel comfortable to be able to make them get up in the day and come to school and be excited about it? That's where we start. That's how all of us started. We all had somebody spark something in us to get us to the point that we're at here. How do we work backwards, right? How do we get to the anecdote that was just shared around, the young person who utilized the math, equation or calculation to do something incredible, all right? But he learned it here at ETHS. How do we start there and then we backtrack? How did it all happen? Because and then we get to my belief is that we will get to close these gaps, these historic gaps that we've seen in these standardized tests, right? And I'm just so happy that we're moving beyond just looking at standardized tests, but really looking at the whole child and their families, and finding ways to support them and our staff to make sure that we create more success stories as were shared in this anecdote.
All right, well, thank you again. We're going to move on to our conversation around math. We have an updated math. We have a couple folks staying at the table, and we have 2 new people joining us.
We ready for the second presentation?
Ready.
All right, we are too.
Good.
So our second presentation tonight is our math update. In order to serve the community of Evanston, we see it as critical that our 2 districts work together as one entity. The work of our math department is a great example of the effective and long-term collaboration that leads to tangible, positive results for our students.
Under the leadership of Dale Liebforth and David Wartowski, we've seen scores rebound since COVID closed down schools. And meanwhile, students of color are more likely than ever to access the most challenging high school coursework. Now let us hand this over to Dale and David, who will explain the work behind the strong data and explain some of what lies ahead for further collaboration between our districts.
Thank you. So I was talking to David earlier tonight. I said, how long have we known each other for? And I guess 21 years, right? So we were teaching together back in the day, and then as you went to Niles North, we collaborated. And over the last 7 years, we've been doing work collaborating between our 2 districts. I've been department chair over 10 years, and that was one of the first things that I knew was really important. How can we work, K through 12 on making sure our students have a smooth transition to the high school, but really a successful mathematics pathway along the way. So tonight we're going to talk about our shared commitment, a look at impact and the road ahead, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask some questions at the end. And since we've known each other so long, we might actually be finishing each other's sentence. There you go. All right. We didn't practice that enough, I guess, right? We'll try that again later. So our shared commitment, we want to look at our vision and our work, and so we'll start with that. There's 2 kind of critical primary aspects of our vision, and the first is academic. We want all students to meet or exceed grade level expectations, and we'll highlight some of the data in the report. We want them to understand the fundamentals of mathematics, but we also want them to be collaborative. We want them to be able to communicate, to really make their thinking visible in the classroom, and we'll take a little peek into the classroom as well.
And a second part of our vision is about student attitudes. When they look in the mirror, do they see a mathematician? Do they experience joy when they're figuring out a math task? That's a big piece of what we want for our students. And so that comes out in the experience they have in our classrooms. Is it one that's culturally relevant? Is it something that's done in the collective? Are they working together to construct meaning? And as a result of all that, when they walk around the world, do they see the math everywhere they go? We're going to walk through our work, take a look at the impact and look at the road ahead, but we want to pause for a moment and just stop and say, well, what are our commitments? In every decision we make, what are we committed to? So number one, moving away from gatekeeping and instead gate opening. And you'll see that's a part of our work, allowing access to students across the district. That also means holding high expectations for all students. Well, high expectations means what? First of all, commitment to standards. So grade level standards are for all students. And in knowing that having a constant work to differentiate, that every student is stretched. Every student has the support to reach those expectations that we have for them. Given those commitments, we'll talk through our actions. In a moment, Dale's going to explain to you how we have a pathway set up across our districts that's accelerated for all students. He'll talk a little bit about a common curriculum we have for courses that we share. We both have algebra, we both have geometry, and they have the same curriculum in both districts. Also, we'll touch on teacher collaboration, whether it be the joint creation of assessments, working together anytime we're evaluating our materials, or being in each other's classrooms, something that we're already going to be doing in the coming weeks, and we're looking forward to. And all of that to move towards instruction that always is centering around what students think.
Thank you for mentioning the students. I have students written in big letters, and we want to talk a little bit about their pathway here through the K through 12 space. In the K-5, they're learning the fundamentals of mathematics together, and we'll watch as they travel through the pathway. So we thought we'd just lay out the pathway for everyone, so we're all on the same page as we kind of highlight different aspects of it. So after you come out of the K-5 fundamentals of math, you head into sixth grade, where you'll learn Math 6. That's all the sixth grade standards. You'll transfer into seventh grade and do Math 7. And in algebra, you'll actually do all the eighth grade standards as well as all the algebra standards. So across the country, algebra is a freshman year class. But here in Evanston, we've traditionally had algebra be that eighth grade class. And so we're really working to get 4 years of standards within 3 years. So that's, acceleration as you look across the country, and we have many students who are traveling up through algebra who are successful, and then they come to the high school and they end up in geometry. And in 2018, 2019, we actually made some changes to our geometry class. We took it to Pathway to Honors, which meant we took our regular and honors class and we blended them together. We wanted all students to have access to our highest level curriculum, and we wanted those students to be held accountable to the standards of geometry. And so we made that change in 18, 19, and then we moved that along through the pathway, which I'll talk about in a minute. But oftentimes, students will want to take geometry before high school. To end up at the end of the pathway, which I'll highlight in a minute, you need to take geometry before you get here. So if you're in District 65, you can take geometry there if you've successfully completed algebra. We also have, new this year, David has been working with his teams on an ALEX program, which actually has the students not only take all the eighth grade standards in algebra, but also extend beyond in classroom time and out of class through an ALEX course that has the complete geometry series of topics. And if students complete that successfully, then they can start here in Algebra 2. And then last summer, we debuted our Summer Geometry Complete. It's a course we've had for a while for students who did well in algebra freshman year, and they took geometry as a rising sophomore to end up in calculus. But this is kind of a pre-ninth grade course. We had a lot of success. We'll highlight some of the data from that in a minute. And but students who don't take geometry before they get here will take it freshman year, and we have a variety of options. You probably have heard about our geometry and construction program or saw the house being built as you drove in. And we're also partnering with our Arts and Innovation Division on Intro to Engineering, Design, and Geometry. And that's pretty exciting to show different ways to look at geometry than we've seen in the past. But all of those classes here at the high school, those are Pathway to Honors classes, so all students are exposed to high levels of geometry. Some students, based on the proficiency coming out of the 8th grade, we realized that, in order to have a strong fundamental understanding of mathematics and to successfully navigate our pathway, we do have some students come here to take algebra. Some will take pre-algebra. We have a variety of different options. Sometimes students just need a different look at it. So we'll have them take algebra and entrepreneurship, algebra and coding to give them a different view of algebra. And we really want to have, as that freshman year class, we want students to really have a fundamental understanding so that they can successfully navigate the path. We'll talk about access to courses, but we also want students to be successful as they travel through the pathway. We did go Pathway to Honors for Algebra 2, and then based on some work we did with the College Board, we were able to do AP Pre-Calculus for all, and this is the first year of that course. And so that's really, one of the highlights we'll talk about in a minute, and then we'll have students end up at some college level class. Oftentimes it's AP Calc or AP Stats senior year. Students who started in algebra and they do well often are encouraged to take that summer geometry program as a rising sophomore so that they can get to calculus or statistics. And traveling all the way back to those students who took geometry before they even came here, they will still be in multivariable calculus and linear algebra. And we do have the most sections ever of multivariable calculus and linear algebra this year. So we have 3 sections, about 75 kids this year, taking I would say the highest level, but some of those students can currently take our advanced topics in math class. That's currently taught by Richard Agan and a Northwestern professor here. So students can go well beyond. Most of the students that travel in the pathway end up in kind of AP Calculus or AP Statistics. But if you started out a little earlier in the pathway, you can move beyond. And recently, we've done a lot of work. We're actually leading some of this work across the country, but we've looked at different ways to kind of see the pathway. We've been working on data science and some other courses that give a different look at mathematics. In the earlier report, we talked about, like, when am I ever gonna need this, or what do I wanna be when I grow up? This gives a look at that. Students, it's very project-oriented. You're working with the community, you're solving real problems, you're doing work that really speaks to you as a person, and so we've been developing those courses as well. So we started with kind of the traditional pathway, but we're really looking deeply and leading the way at Evanston. And I think as we look down to the K-8 space, a lot of the computer science initiatives you have, among other things that we have down there as well, you can see that kind of trickle up, and the students have more expertise as they come to us, so that's really exciting to see. And most importantly, throughout the path, from kindergarten when you're with your friends all the way up to calculus on the senior year, junior senior year end, you're with all your friends. You're learning math at the highest level. Everyone has access to the highest level curriculum and is held to the standard of mastering that particular course before they move through the pathway. And so really this wasn't something that was always the case. And I think structurally, we've worked for a long time on the structures, really creating the pathway for students so that everyone could make it through the pathway.
And I would just say that's echoing that one of our commitments of gate opening rather than gatekeeping. Back, the days used to be that you had to get a certain score in 5th grade to access some of these pathways, and now you have students who are able to make the choices based on what they know is best for themselves.
That was a lot. I went all the way K-12. I probably talked too much, but we'll give you a little peek in the classroom. Really, the classroom looks different than it did in the past, and we tried to put some pictures on there that would highlight that. But you no longer have a teacher standing up front showing you how to do things, and then asking you to kind of give that straight back to them. We want to have a collaborative environment. So students own the learning in our classrooms, and that's K through 12. Discussion, you'll hear a lot of noise in the classrooms, positive noise. The teacher will be facilitating and moving about the room. Students have agency. Students are driving the learning, often get to have a lot of choice in the learning. They're seen and heard in the classroom. They carry the load. They kind of take ownership of the learning. They know what they're learning, they know why they're learning it, they know what success looks like, and we're weaving in all the 21st century skills that we know are critical for them in the future. Beyond the math content we're learning, we really work to kind of on the cutting edge of what we're able to do in math. We try to give them the skills that are necessary for success in the 21st century. And so we're working with some of the leading researchers in the area, some of the top minds of the mathematics world, and you can even see Peter Liljedahl. We've seen him present a number of times on vertical surfaces, and so you can see some students do that. Many of our teachers are implementing that, and I know as we're going to do some classroom visits, I've seen that in the the middle school and elementary space as well. So different looking classroom. It's an exciting, active classroom where students are learning math and showing some love for it along the way. We highlighted the path earlier and gave you a look in the classroom, but we also kind of have a lot of conversations about how are you going to transfer from 8th grade to 9th grade. How can we make that a smooth process? How can we make sure that everyone has success freshman year? And so every year we look at our placement. There's a variety of things we review. We look at standardized test scores, the MAP and STAR math, ALEX. We look at course pathways. How are students navigating our course pathways? What are their course taking patterns? What grades did they get? How well did they do? Did they learn the standards? We look at the classroom data, and we have input from teachers, and we had been seeing that there were some algebra and numeracy gaps in our freshman classes, and so that led us to make some changes to our math placement. In the past, we used course grades, indicators of academic progress. We had conversations with middle school administration, teacher recs, and we looked at their highest 8th grade math score throughout the year. Now we are looking at the highest MAP score only. This aligns with our practice here at the high school for English and history and biology, who also use the MAP, and this is for incoming freshman placement. If you have a MAP score of 237 or higher, it places into geometry, and we have about the same number of geometry students currently that we've had in the past. Additional implications of this, we no longer are placing freshmen into geometry with support. We still have our geometry with support program for sophomores and above, and if freshmen elect to take that, they can if they're looking for support scheduled into their day for their math class. Some students will take Algebra 1, they might take Algebra and Entrepreneurship, Algebra and Coding to get a different look, but to have that fundamental baseline of algebra, and we have some students in pre-algebra. And the summary here is, you know, we've been doing this for a long time, opening up access, but we looked at students kind of successfully navigating our pathway or having a successful, strong start to their high school math career, and we saw that there are some challenges there. And so if you know better, you do better, and so we're taking a look at that, and we really want students to start the high school strong. District 65 is doing an amazing job of preparing students as they head to 8th grade, so how can we have a nice, strong start to freshman year? And so some of these changes will hopefully set that base so students can progress through and ultimately end up being successful, not just getting into a calculus or statistics AP class, but being successful in that class as well. And so that's really the goal behind some of these changes.
All right, so Dale, you get to pause for a moment here. A look at our impact. There's three ways that we're going to walk through and share this is ways that we look at our impact. Number one, growth. What do we see in growth patterns? Number two, attainment. And number three, course access and success in those courses. Who's taking what classes? How are they doing? So we'll start by taking a look at grades 1 through 8 growth patterns. It does not include kindergarten because we have to look for the previous year to see the growth. What you're seeing here are all the grades together, right? So this is not a single cohort. This is all the grades back in 18, 19, all the way up through right now, looking at winter map. So this is simply asking what % of students within a particular year made expected gains. Now, statistically, nationally, 50% of students will make expected gains. And back in, right before the pandemic, that was roughly true, but you see a 17-point difference between our white and Asian students versus our Black and Latinx students. So maybe on average, we were about average, but you can see the difference there. So then COVID happens, and you see a dip. At a time when we needed more growth, we had less. Until recently, we saw a climb up, and then even more recently, a climb up again. And what you can see in our latest data, which is what you see on the far right, is two things have happened. Number one, we have the highest growth we've seen in a number of years, higher than pre-pandemic. And number two, the differences in racial predictability of growth patterns has lessened. Now we're seeing 12 points. Now, let's be clear, that should be 0. But we're seeing something going in the right direction, and I think it's worth noting that and having a little celebration and saying, okay, and so how do we keep doing that work? We also looked at growth specifically in middle school. So we did an analysis at the end of last year, and the reason we did this is because of the number of changes that Dale spoke to just a little bit ago. We had a certain way that we accelerated back in the past, and we changed the way that we have our acceleration. So we have a different way that we accelerate now. This is a comparison of those two ways of acceleration. So you're seeing the school year 18-19 in blue versus our last school year in red. The first way we looked at it is by grade. So whether you're in 6th grade, 7th grade, or 8th grade, we saw at least as good of growth as before, if not stronger, particularly in 6th grade. That little green bar is reminding us that 50% is what we'd expect. A second way we looked at growth in middle school last year was by attainment level. So you see here in the middle, we asked ourselves, well, wait a minute, what do growth patterns look like based on where a student starts? Because how is it affecting students on the lower end of attainment versus the higher end of attainment? And what we saw is that regardless of where you started, we saw higher growth, at least the same, if not higher. I would call this the raising tide raises all ships. Now, you see there on the right of that graph, that those students in particular were the ones who in the past had taken their own course. We called it Math 6-7. This existed back in 2019. And yet in this new acceleration model where it was opened up and we didn't place kids based on 5th grade scores anymore, we saw that those students are now taking Math 6 along with all of their friends, as Dale was referring to them, did not suffer. In fact, the growth rates were slightly higher. The third way we looked at growth was by race, and you can see once again, no one was harmed in any group. That across race we saw improved growth. Back to you, Dale.
We also see growth at the high school. We use the SAT suite, so we have the PSAT 8-9 and the PSAT 10, and we saw growth across the groups there. We expect to have a 12-point growth, and we saw that in most of our groups that we have. One of the highlights here is if you look at the Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, the growth was 6% and 4%, so those were our highest growth. And so we saw growth from students 8, 9 to 10. And then as you look at students from the PSAT 10 to the SAT 11, so from sophomore to junior year, we started out approaching at a score of 490, and we ended up being within the range. We did end up at 530 for the SAT, so we did move from yellow to green, if you will, approaching the benchmark, on that average score to meets or exceeds. So not only were we within the range, but we were able to see that we moved into the meets or exceeds benchmark. So not only are we seeing growth at District 65, we're seeing growth here at the high school as well.
So in addition to growth, we look at attainment. So what you're seeing here is a measure of average test percentile on a winter map. So a way that we can look at attainment. Again, going back to a couple years before the pandemic, and then we saw this dip. Now, just, a little spike right after COVID. I will remind everyone that that test was taken at home. And then there was a big dip right after COVID of attainment. And then a slight increase. And then finally, a massive move up on the right. So our most recent data, if you compare the far right to the far left, you're going to see that they're both right around 62 as our average percentile, signifying that most recently, we are finally at a place where academically we are seeing students performing as they were prior to COVID. That same data we looked at by race, and there's two stories here. One is those increases are across race. Two, I'd echo what Pat reminded us a little while ago, look at the differences by race still. Even though there's improvement by race, we still have great disparities in predictability.
And then we look at attainment on the SAT Math grade 11. We saw from grade 8 through grade 11, we saw the proficiency increases. We're well above the state average. We have a higher percentage for Asian and white students. And again, as David said, we have work to do. If you look at our African American, Black, and Hispanic Latinx numbers, we have a lot of work still to be done. Yet those are still above the state average, but we need to have some improvement along those lines, and that's what we're actively working on, in our department and in both of our districts. If you take a look at impact, we mentioned access to courses and success in those courses. So we took a look at, who's completing geometry prior to high school. In the past, they were selected by the system. There was a test score and some other metrics in District 65 early on that would put you on an accelerated pathway. And in 2019, 18% of all students took geometry before they got to the high school. It was 2 to 3% of Black and Latinx students who took geometry. And so we wanted to have more students in the accelerated pathway. So as we looked at it, I think Alex will help with these numbers as students finish that. We're encouraging our students, particularly students of color, to take advantage of that program. And we're actively recruiting students for the ETHS Summer Geometry program that we started last year as well. Last summer, we saw 17% of all students took geometry before they came in, but based on kind of a lot of hard work by staff and teachers and families in District 65, we were able to encourage students to take that summer geometry class as an accelerated move, and we saw that now 14% of our Black and Latinx students are taking geometry before they get here. And so if you look at kind of accelerating the pathway and ending up in the higher level math classes, junior, senior year, we should see a more diverse classroom in terms of the Black and Latinx students that we were able to start off before they even come here, taking geometry, starting in Algebra 2, and then moving through the pathway. So that's one place where we saw it. And by the way, the students who are now in Algebra 2 as freshmen are incredibly successful, across race. They're getting A's and B's, doing very well, and we anticipate them continuing to move throughout the pathway. Thank you for all your work on that. I know work's ongoing for this summer's recruitment as well. We want to continue that. We don't want that to be a one-year jump. We want that to be a continued kind of institutionalized process, if you will, where we continually have students joining that pathway. If you look on the other end, kind of junior, senior year, we talked about our AP Calculus and AP Stats course. We remained pretty consistent in terms of our Black, African American, and Hispanic Latino numbers across from 2019 all the way up to 23-24. We are excited, and I mentioned this earlier, about the AP Pre-Calculus for All. These are juniors and seniors. Seniors in AP Pre-Calc, they used to just take Pre-Calculus. It was pathway to honors, but they didn't get a chance to experience AP Math while at the high school. They now get a chance to do that. And students who are juniors or below, they get to see AP Pre-Calculus and have that kind of AP exam experience before they get into their calculus or statistics class senior year. And so just to look at the numbers, there are 83 new unique Black students in AP Math classes. There are 84 unique Latinx students that didn't have that opportunity in the past. And so 167 Black and Latinx students now taking AP Math to either set them up for success freshman year in college, to set them up for success here at senior year as they take a calculus statistics. And so we're really excited about the opportunity that that course is providing. Never mind, we are at that kind of AP high level. Those are juniors, they're taking the SAT. There's a lot of advantages as we move through the pathway. And we hope that ultimately helps our success attainment numbers, particularly as you look across student groups.
So now that we've walked through some of the impact we've seen as a result of our shared work, I just want to summarize, what our work is. You see opportunities for all. How are we providing access to all students the opportunities that exist across our districts? Two, that those expectations stay, the standards, the grade level standards, and with that, both the stretch for all students and the support as students seek to stretch themselves. And thirdly, this ongoing engagement and collaboration, which is all about effective instruction and doing what we know is best for student learning. Our impact that we've walked you through just now, we've showed that attainment has rebounded. We see the closing of some racialized gaps in K-8. Dale's walked us through how the representation across races improved in courses. We've seen stronger growth than before, and while we didn't share the data in here, we're also seeing from our students that their attitudes in terms of that joy and that identity is stronger than we've seen really at any point. Yet we're also clear in our data that there's work ahead of us. At the end of the day, we're in this space of moving from a lot of technical structure work to, as we complete that, really go stronger and stronger into the adaptive work. The assessments, the curriculum, the placement, that's all important and needs to be continually monitored and improved over time. But we more and more are focusing on instruction.
Yeah, I think it took a while to build the structures for access, and now to take that deep dive into the classroom. We actually have, led by our instructional coaches, Jake and Jamila, as well as Jody. They're actually visiting each other's classrooms and seeing what the classroom looks like and looking at student work. So it's pretty exciting to be able to dig down into like what's actually happening in the classroom, and that's visits from District 65 to 202 and from 202 to 65 to see what's happening in each other's classrooms, to help align our algebra and geometry courses. And really, that's where the magic's happening. That's where our teachers are working very hard to stretch all students and support all students. We've set a structure where everyone's being taught at a really high level, and how do you stretch students even further? How do you support students, as they work toward that standard? So we want to ensure moving forward that we have high expectations with support and stretch. We want to maintain our equitable pathways and make sure that we have continued representation throughout the pathway. Really strong focus on that K2 foundation. When they come in kindergarten, like they shouldn't be behind. Like everyone's there in kindergarten starting together. So how can we K2 really solidify the foundation in math, that fundamental mathematical understanding that we need them to have throughout their pathway here? And then how can we really focus on pre-algebra support? That's not just pre-algebra, but actually the pathway, grades 3 through 8, anything before algebra, the fundamental algebra concepts, how do we make sure that they have those as they're moving through from year to year? We want to continue to strengthen the transition from 65 to 202. Some of that is, our refining our shared courses. We're looking at Algebra 1 and geometry. We're looking at revamping and kind of realigning the standards of Algebra 1 so our courses look more similar. Assessment collaboration, what do tests look like? What are students expected to do? What is their student work? What do we expect to see from them in that? And we'll continue to monitor our freshman placement as well. We do that every year. We take a look at, did it work, and do we need to do something differently? Do we need to do something better? And I think most importantly, we kind of started with that on this slide, instruction, right? How do we elevate what's working well? How do you support effective instruction? As we were looking through some of the data, there was pockets of some real success stories. And so what's happening there? There was some grades or some specific classrooms where things were really, we saw some dramatic kind of increases in the data. So really, how do we elevate that? How do we support effective instruction? How do we figure out what we're doing in the classroom and make sure that students really see from K all the way through 12 and that pathway explained a really successful mathematical experience where they're continuing to build on what they know and are able to do, but also can speak mathematics with each other and can really be excited about really understanding the world around them, but also having mathematics that really speaks to them and is culturally relevant and helps them to kind of internalize what's happening in the math classroom and then use that moving forward on whatever they plan to do post-high school. Questions?
First of all, I want to say thank you for that. Lots of really good and exciting information. I feel joy. So, board, questions? Leah?
Okay. I hope I can articulate my question well. So you talked about, and I like the emphasis on instruction, and student-centered instruction in combination with, I'm reading here, evidence-driven collaborative teams. You talked a little bit about that. It decenters the teacher. And I just kind of wanted to be more up-to-date, because in the recent past, I feel like there was sort of the trend of the flipped classroom. And high school level students sometimes found that really frustrating. And so that's the first thing I thought of when I thought of this. But I wanted to know a little bit more what that really means or what that really looks like. And I guess I wanted even a little bit more reassurance that sounds like there's that collaboration between 65 and 202. So if there's a focus on instruction, students, as they come through and to the high school, are going to be really comfortable with this type of instruction, and you don't hear the comment like, my teacher isn't teaching.
The flipped classroom, I've seen go awry, so I know, and it ends up when the students have a perception that you're not teaching me. I think a way I'd give a glimpse to what we're talking about student-centered is So a lot of us have experienced like an I do, then we do, then you do, and that's a classic way of teaching. And that can be perceived as like, okay, my job is to make sure I'm doing what the teacher says. Example 1, example 2, cool, now my turn, right? And so the ownership isn't necessarily there. We have a natural way of being mathematicians. We're born to be mathematicians, all of us. And yet this country suffers from a lot of people saying, oh, I'm not good at math. It's like okay to say you're not good at math in this country. Part of that is because our job, and this is no one's fault in Evanston, it's a national thing, of like, we're mimicking teachers. Well, what do they want us to think? And so what we're knowing in a lot of the research is that we have to flip that. You give an engaging task to students, they pursue it, they make sense of it, they share their thinking with each other, and the teacher absolutely is teaching because she's pulling out all the ideas that are coming out and making the connections and having everyone play off of each other so they understand the several ways to do that. I'm feeling academically seen and heard as a student. So my social emotional health is improving as well as my cognition as I'm allowed to voice in a math classroom. That's how I would explain what we're after.
I agree. Sometimes we have more open-ended questions that allow students to kind of enter into the problem and then to be stretched to a variety of different levels. It gives students more choice and voice in the classroom. We still have direct instruction. You'll walk into a class and see a teacher kind of explicitly teaching a particular concept. A lot of times they will start from a problem. Here's a problem, and when you get stuck, I'm listening to where you're stuck, and then I'm using that to tailor that direct instruction. And then we'll come back and reinforce and practice it. And you know, we've been in conversations with teachers when I hear that, and I do, like, they're not teaching us. It's like, well, you know, we might not be, get out your notebook, take notes, we're going to do that in a traditional sense, but how can you, as you're reviewing problems, this is our new idea, right? This is something that you really want to pay attention to, Cornell note style, or however you want to do it, but really to lift up, like, this is the teaching that's happening, right? It seems like I'm just going over a problem and you're like filling in a page or filling in, you know, a worksheet, but really to be explicit that this is the new lesson for today. I started you out so I could see where you're at, diagnose kind of where students are at, and really give them specific tailored instruction. But then in that instruction being really explicit about what you're trying to do. I am teaching you now. We are going over a problem. I'm going to do one with you. And now you can try, and you have more tools based on that instruction to do it. So I think a little bit more clarity in that structure is helpful. Flipped classroom specifically is when you're like, you will kind of watch the instruction at home on a video, and then you'll come into class and we'll work through problems together, versus me kind of giving you that lesson in class and you going home and struggling all on your own. And so we do that in pockets, but that's not widely kind of experience that we have in most of our classrooms.
I'd like to add just two things. I don't think that question that you raised about is my teacher teaching is going to go away, because everyone in here, everybody at the table, everybody my age, everybody has got kids, went through I do, we do, you do. That was our traditional model. So even when we hear these things at the dinner table or in conversations with our students, we're going to say, oh, that's not teaching. But I will tell you very much, having been the support administrator for math department here for 14 years, it is very much teaching. It's error, miscue analysis. It's a very literacy-rich environment, and students are learning and progressing in that. And I think that's far more cognitively demanding than what we had, because in the old model, you could hide. You could wait out the teacher for the right answer, or you could just wait and be resistant in that way. So it's hard to hide in these classrooms. They're exciting, they're energetic, and there is a space for that other model, though. Every once in a while, you do need to do that. And just my last thing on the flipped classroom, I think COVID did away with the flipped classroom, really put it behind, because we spent a lot of time watching videos during COVID.
I appreciate you answering, and I think you raised a really important point about the perspective of the adults and how we were taught. But I think it just emphasizes how much having these kinds of explicit conversations are important so that people understand it, both parents, guardians, and the students.
I appreciated that part in the presentation when you had the classrooms and you could see the different structure and how some kids were sitting in a circle, and it did not look like the math class that I took. But then, of course, I didn't have joy for math. So, and what you're trying to get at is a whole different thinking, the way kids think about math. And I think it is important to make sure that the kids understand that this is different by design, that you are doing something different, and that their parents understand, especially their parents understand that this is different, so that when they get that feedback from their student and they ask them, so, how was the classroom set up? And they kind of say, well, we were sitting in a circle, and they're like, you were? So it's just really important that parents really get this and understand this.
Yeah, I think as we move forward, just being explicit
Yeah.
about that will be incredibly important. But we want this classroom to look different because the skills they'll need in the future are different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what you're saying, Pat. Again, math, again, I wasn't great at it, especially when I got to high school. And I had a geometry teacher. First day of class, he's like, you know what? The way you can pass my class, sit down, be quiet. And that's it. So I hid. I hid in the back of the classroom. I got my D, I passed. And that's how it was back then, right? And, I was robbed. I mean, I was robbed of what our kids are seeing now, like a new design, a new way, a new approach that really, again, centers students, right? And a lot of kids were like that. So we wonder why we have these historical gaps in academics, right? This is something that and injustice has been going on for decades, so it's just so great to see this. But for me, a little traumatic because I wish I would have had what our kids are, what y'all are designing, right? Because again, that just wasn't available to me, right? Because it just didn't interest me. So, yeah, just wanted to say that I appreciate these new approaches where we're really trying to center student voice, really trying to teach to where they're at, and really trying to just foster learning through problem solving, right? Again, we have a bunch of great students here, young folks, who are working collectively to try to solve the climate crisis, right? So, it's something that we should have taken care of, right? So that's what we want to continue to do, right? To collectively problem solve as a society. So when we do that in all of our classes, in literacy, in math, you take a problem that people can relate to. It's like, hey, everybody, let's get together and talk about it, like we're talking about it as board members today. That's when change happens. That's when fundamental change can really, really, really occur. Versus I do, me do, you do, right? Okay, you're just teaching people to copy you and repeating the same patterns. These may be mistaken patterns, but repeating the same thing over and over again. We wonder why things don't change. So again, kudos to all our math teams, our colleagues who are doing this incredible work, really trying to again make learning math much more fun, much more engaging. And won't allow children to hide, but to really be embraced in learning, right? That's what we want. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and we hope no one has that experience in our math classes. That's the goal, right? And we said earlier we have work to do. I think we still do, but I know that's difficult to share. I appreciate that, and that would be the goal, is to never have that happen here in Evanston.
I think I had the opposite experience. I loved math as a kid, but I also had an amazing teacher who, was teaching us about compound interest. And I was like, wait, with basic math, I can make my money grow like that? But you're right, this, repetition, we're not training our kids to be able to memorize things. The great thing with math is being able to really utilize it. So I really appreciated that story about this student who pulled high school math out and solved this factory problem that's going to be so efficient and effective moving forward. I think if anything, it really focuses on critical thinking. How can we connect the dots and not just trying to solve for the bottom line? So thank you for doing this, and it's great to see that there are options for kids. As we know, there isn't just one solution for all of them.
Just to jump in, 21st century learning, right? Like, that's now. so maybe we're 22nd century.
22nd century. Fair enough.
And I love the new courses. I don't know as much about the middle schools and the elementary, but what we're doing in the high schools, I think is spot on for opening, as you said, the gate opening versus gatekeeping. So if you go to the slide, though, that shows the stats on, I just remember seeing 12%, I think it was the SAT for Black students. And it's kind of, it's hard to see,
that one,
right?
yeah.
So with that, I'm going to just be provocative for a moment. We should be sued. Just kidding, I don't want us to be sued, but that's horrific. And it makes me think, like you were saying, Pete, or I guess we were all kind of talking about teaching, and I would argue we're not, because if kids aren't learning, then we're not teaching, even though we're trying. And so one of the things I think about, given that our kids are brilliant, and our Black students are brilliant as any of the other students who are here, could we perhaps map those pathways, maybe color-coded, racially speaking, to understand where is that, and you probably already know, but where are those spaces in which we see our kids, that bifurcation occurring, so that we know, maybe that's where the money goes in, maybe that's where those moments are that we have to beef up those systems, so that because we're doing this great thing in math, so I'm wondering, will we see that pay off in SAT scores when we're looking at the data literacy that kids are doing? But given what we are all saying, that can't be. So, just curious.
Yeah,
if we
I
could look
agree.
at
I said I had the same exact reaction. I mean, if you look at it compared to the state, we're doing better than the state, we're one of the best, but that 12%
That looks terrible.
is really bad, right? And so what we've done is individually look at students. It is one of the reasons we looked at that placement. I mean, a lot of the SAT is algebra, right? So heart of algebra is a big chunk of it. So did you learn algebra? Fundamentally have a good understanding of algebra so that you can be successful in Algebra 2. Are you getting to Algebra 2 by junior year? We had students who weren't getting to Algebra 2, so you haven't even been exposed to some of the content that's on the SAT. So really, how do you have a super strong algebra, either 8th grade or 9th grade? How do you have that fundamental baseline of algebra? How do you integrate that algebra throughout the geometry course, and then really get to Algebra 2 the following year and expand on what you know? And we hope that would see a real focus on that would help to improve the outcomes here, as well as some of the other changes that we've discussed.
So we're in our first year, so in 2 more years, we could possibly see that change? Possibly, okay.
That's the plan.
That's good for us to keep in mind.
Earlier.
I was just going to add a little bit. I think so just keeping in mind the statistic that we're seeing right now, this is their 12th year of schooling in Evanston, right? And so this speaks to why we have to work together so closely. And 2 things that I suppose I would highlight. One is that while the other slide around growth had something to celebrate in that there's a less difference than before, we should also be shocked that there's any difference at all. That one other slide was growth rates, not attainment rates, right? Showing us that
That's 62, you're talking about.
the 17 difference and then the 12 difference. So what that tells us is that the attainment levels between Black and Latinx students versus white and Asian students, they grow further apart over time. And that speaks to, 2 of the key things you saw us name is foundational. So in K2, attitudes typically lock in for children around 3rd grade. And that is largely based on whether they are seeing success and whether they're feeling their academic voice in the space, right? So that's huge work for us to focus on in K2. And we're getting, I think, smarter and smarter about what's going on there. That includes a combination of being really clear on what the essential learning is. There's a lot of standards. What's essential? What's really all kids got to know? And we've been leaning a lot into that. And it's also climate. It's culture. How do I, as a white man, act in a room of kids of all colors and backgrounds? How am I building relationships? How am I ensuring that they feel comfortable enough to share their thinking, especially when they think they might be wrong? Those things matter tremendously, and that's a lot of where our work is, I would say.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, given, the work that we're doing in the slides that we saw about the disparities, that I agree with my colleagues that it's unacceptable. But I wanted to hear, if we're diving into instruction, if you could talk a little bit about the role of struggle, right? Because we're talking about the joy of math and making it fun, and that's really important. But, I was trying to help my 6th grader with math, dividing fractions. I was terrible at it. He got very frustrated with me for being unable to help him. So the best I could do was tell him, go ask your teacher, right? That kind of help-seeking behavior, right? And he did, and he was still frustrated, he was still unhappy, but I do feel like that struggle is really important. And for students not to see that struggle as meaning that they're bad at math, right? That they can't do it. So speaking to that attitudinal piece of instruction and climate, how do we build in that kind of, if you're struggling, if you really don't like it, that doesn't mean you're bad at it, that you can't do it, that you can't be successful at it. So how do we create that?
I think I would start myself pointing out that, just so we're all clear, the word joy is a really interesting word. We have a J factor that we talk about in our district. And I don't know that joy means I walk around always with a big smile on my face because everything's roses. I think joy is much more complicated than that. And when we talk about our vision of joy in math, it includes finding joy in solving complex problems. So that means productive struggle. That means in the moments of frustration, I stick with it because I actually kind of like this when it is hard. Right? And so fostering that. And I think it's a complex web that creates that space. I'll go back to culture and climate. Yeah. That's huge. Do I feel comfortable showing up as who I am, not just, including my academic self is a huge part. I'll stop there. I think that's one of the hugest factors, actually.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, are we, seeing that in the instructional practice, right? Helping students productively struggle and feel supported in that, so that you trust your teacher enough to ask them for help, right? That's the relationship piece that you're talking about, is I feel comfortable, I trust my teacher, they're not going to judge me, right? One of the things that students are most afraid of is that their teachers will judge them, right? And dismiss them as not smart. So where do we see the successful instructional practice of helping with that productive struggle?
Yeah, and I think what I highlight is we do see that a lot, and we get really, like Dale mentioned, looking across data and seeing what I would call bright spots. And in these spaces, there's often subtle things that happen that go a long way. I'll just give an example of a couple of them. One is students are talking to other students regularly. The idea of just pause, can you turn to a shoulder partner and share your thinking? A subtle thing, but it transforms what goes on in that classroom. Another very subtle thing that has a lot of power, and there's actually a paper written about this, is the difference between the word could and should. So when someone's stuck, do you respond by saying, well, what should you do? That implies, I know, can you figure out what's in my head? Versus, what could you do? Which implies, world's your oyster. What do you think? Right? So subtle things like that go a long way to shifting what you're talking about, I think, of whether students feel that they can show up as their whole selves and not be concerned about ridicule. And it creates these spaces, ultimately, that Dale was referring to before, of, I think he called it a productive noisiness in the classroom, where there's a lot of voices.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, group work, it has a lot to do with it. You're productively struggling with your classmates. I think celebrating process over kind of getting an answer, looking at different methods, different ways of thinking about it. Sometimes it's just the language you use. Like, great, we messed up. Let's see what went wrong. Let's look at an error analysis, or how can we do it differently, or what other ideas do you have to build on that? I mean, I used to have a poster in my classroom. Oh, it wasn't even a poster. It was like random pieces of paper that said wrong, 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 right, wrong, wrong, right. So people get problems wrong all the time before they figure out how to do it. It takes a lot of practice sometimes to do that. So I think it's messaging, it's the language you use, it's the framework of the classroom, it's celebrating kind of that struggle, it's looking at the process over getting an answer, it's looking at multiple different ways to tackle a problem. So I think many of those things you'll see, it'd be hard to go through like one of our block periods and not hear the teacher celebrate failure or struggle, right? That's great. You know, now we know what we need to work on, and how do we fight through that. And I think just a lot of things are immediate for students nowadays, like go on to the next thing, go on to the next thing. So how do I have you productively struggle continually with support and love so that you can get to kind of the next, you know, space that you need to get into to be successful. So I think it'd be hard to walk into a classroom and not see that happening all the time, and I'm confident that that's happening in District 65 as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Nicole and then Monique.
Sorry, I don't want to prolong anything, but I just have a quick question. Like, taking a step back and like, Mr. Leaforth, you talked a little bit about like kindergarten, right? So everyone's starting in the same place, and looking at students like immediately when they start school, like we want them all to start from the same place and begin learning math. And I think an important part of that is literacy. So earlier we looked a little bit at the holistic view of a student, and I'm just kind of curious as to what you all are doing looking at literacy as a factor in math and learning math early on.
All right, I can pick up a little bit on that. So a couple things I want to frame. As students enter our district in kindergarten, students are arriving with very different degrees of readiness, both on the literacy and the numeracy side. And really what we focus on as kids enter are essentially building the norms of a classroom, building how we do school, and move into the very concrete skills of early literacy and early numeracy. They're both early. So on the numeracy side, there are a lot of activities, sorting, thinking through, pattern finding, that are not literacy dependent in the very early stages as we are building the foundational skills in our students to ensure access to text. And so it is over time that kids then will use literacy to access math, but not originally in our kindergarten or kindergarten and first grade space. And so we are building both, and in K2 we have very specific benchmarks both on the literacy side and the numeracy side in order to understand where are our kids in regards to those foundational blocks in reading and math, and what are we doing to help get them to those really critical data indicators that will allow students to start accessing math by text, as well as have a strong foundational early numeracy. So initially in kindergarten, literacy is not a gatekeeper for math because they're not necessarily literacy dependent tasks, and then we're doing a lot of work around phonics, phonemic awareness to build our readers so that when text becomes more important in accessing math, they have those skills. And because of the benchmarks we're using, we're able to also intervene if kids are not moving forward at the rate that we hope.
Okay, I just like to follow up with that, like, I'm just thinking if kids are coming in, like, if their parents aren't reading to them, like, maybe, like, as a 4-year-old or something, they aren't being read to as much as a different peer in their class, or in the summers, they don't spend as much time with books, or they aren't, like, what I'm thinking of is, like, if you're behind when you start, wouldn't you just stay behind, like, because if this classroom, like, I understand that teachers have a certain capacity, right? But like, how do we make sure like it's not like equality, but it's really equity, and we're actually bringing the students who are behind actually to the same level? Because if you're behind from the start, right, everything builds on itself, and you're just more behind after, right? So that's kind of what I'm more curious about.
Yeah. So one thing that I would point to is our Joseph E. Hill Center, our Early Childhood Center, that offers early childhood education. We have a Doorways to Learnings for 0 to 2, and then an a preschool for 3 through 5-year-olds. I got tripped over. And they're really doing some wonderful work there to ensure that students are hitting these kind of kindergarten readiness marks in order to move into District 65 in a strong place. I think also one of the benefits of the Early Childhood Center is if students do have additional needs, we do a lot of special education evaluation, a lot of identification, and a lot of early intervention to help students kind of come to that kindergarten entry point in a stronger place of readiness and with more school experience. That being said, as a district, we are ready to take on every student that walks in our kindergarten classrooms and really kind of assess and work to get kids to that readiness mark as needed. It is more work depending on where kids are when they enter. But the early childhood work at JEH is really strong and has removed, they've brought forward to our school board for the past 2 years academic marks that have eliminated any kind of racial discrepancy amongst their student population.
I also want to add a small piece. I don't want to negate any of the work that we talk about for pre-K, but I do want to double down and emphasize that we have all of our students starting in kindergarten. And, you know, our data is showing that there's some gaps that happen under our watch. And so I think that the way I look at the work we're doing is I look in the mirror and say, well, what is our work? And so, yes, I think there's things that can be done pre-K, but I believe in every part of my soul and professional knowledge that we have the capacity for every kindergartner to be on level by the end of the year. So I think the work is possible, even though historical data shows a lot of opportunities, but those are opportunities. So I just want to be clear on that I think we within that K2 space, the possibilities are there for all kids.
I so love when our student rep speaks because you basically said everything I was going to say. As a youth advocate, and we keep talking about these discrepancies or the gaps are more than just educational. So I'm going to be provocative. And it doesn't start at grade K. I mean, the gap doesn't start there. It enters into our building at that point. But, Nicole, you're absolutely right. If they're already behind, if they're not being read to, if there's a summer learning gap, and we're only thinking about what happens in kindergarten or 8th grade, we're missing an entire group that happened to be predominantly of color that we're chasing behind. And that's the truth. So you articulated everything that all my notes here that I was writing and that I was going to say, that how our students enter into our district matter. And we can have the best teachers in the world, the best strategy, and all of that, but if we're not, and I'm sure we are talking about everything else. I'm sure we are. I know you are. I know, I know the 65 you are, because we definitely are here. But that needs to be spoken, because that's the reality too. Early childhood education is critical. It is so critical. And it sets the foundation. I think you spoke of foundational. That sets the foundation to how we build upon educating our students and helping our families. So, thank you, Nicole. Yeah. You should run for school board.
I agree, thank you. And I just want to jump on, because you started a lot of things, like, again, you got me thinking, and so looking back at this particular slide, right? Discussion-based, decentering the teacher, student agency. Guess where that happens at? Pre-K. Pre-kindergarten is where that actually happens. It's been happening. What happens in our American educational school system is that we start with very much what Dr. Maria Montessori had back in Italy right after the war, where it's like, let's have children learn about, utilize the world that they're in their context to learn and help them develop as human beings. So everything, right, is centered on just exploring the world and the immediate experience that you're having. And then we have kids hit kindergarten, the K-12 system, and now everything gets separated. Oh, well, here's a block of reading, here's a block of math, here's a block of social studies, here's a block of history. when in reality, you can teach, as Nicole suggested, literacy and math, right? You know, in U.S. history, you have math, literacy, all of those pieces integrated, right? So the design of our school system, right? This is American education, not just ours. You know, again, has been this piece where pre-K, you know, does everything that all these best practices that we're just now implementing, right? And I think what's exciting is that we're finally doing it. But at the end of the day, right, we really have to look at how we continue on this path towards centering student voice, student experience, student cultural context, and then really building off of what they're bringing to us. And really building on, again, children don't come, you know, as an isolated piece. I mean, again, they're part of family. And how do we engage family as well, right? So, and that to me, and we're trying to do work at D65 around ensuring that our students who are struggling the most, or most marginalized, their families have wraparound. So I'm, you know, again, at our joint, I think at our joint meeting with the city, you know, there's been several conversations around looking at wraparound services to really address some of the core issues that may be happening in some homes that lack the resources that our middle class and upper middle class homes here in Evanston, again, don't have. So it takes this comprehensive approach. There's things we can do in the classroom, right, and in the schools. But again, we also have to help families, and it's taking this dual generational approach, is that recognizing what is it that children are bringing from home, right? And what resources do they have, what don't they have? And then working with their parents as partners to fill in any gaps that may be there, right? And that might be working with our social service agencies, our community partners, the city, libraries. And that is how, as a community, right, we can help close a gap together. Right, and you know, the Y has some incredible programs. Again, and I think we do that. I mean, we really do try to work as a community. In the 7-8 years I've been a board member, I mean, I do see this really great spirit of collaboration. But again, always more to do, and much better ways to do it. So really, I think that's at the core, is really. And then another thing too is for our team at D65, and I've asked this before, is that we look at the kids assessment, right? So that's a state mandated test. So we can continue the student-centered, culturally responsive teaching that happens in pre-K. The goal of the kids assessment, which is the kindergarten individual developmental survey, right? It's an observational survey, and it measures not only literacy and math, but it also measures, you know, gross motor, you know, social emotional development. It's a comprehensive test. It takes a little long, but I think it's worth it. And that can be another part of what gets reported in the joint reports. Okay, so how well how kindergarten ready are our kiddos in all of those aspects that make up their development? So it's something to think about as we, you know, continue having these conversations around, you know, closing these gaps.
I have a question.
Yes, question.
Thank you. I wonder, Pete, Dr. Bavis, if there is some way that the equity index that we talked about, I think at our last meeting, can be used to help look at all this data we have from our respective districts in a way that would allow us to better understand the progress of our students as they move from one district to the next. Could you maybe opine off the top of your head on how that might look, or what kind of advantages it might offer?
Sure. I think, yeah, no, thank you, Gretchen. You know, I was thinking about that. You know, unfortunately, we came to the equity index a little late for this report.
Sure.
But I do think in terms of a joint report, I think we could use it, because what it will allow us to do is it'll allow us to have an index through which we can compare and year to year and see how we're doing, actually. And I think it could add some context. I know it's done in other districts. They have it as at key transition years, like 8 to 9. They look at it that way, but we could certainly do it. I think that would be important. It would just add some more context to the report too. And it would actually give us some things to work toward to, you know, like we talked about at our last, we're not going to do we're not going to do equity index now, are we?
No.
Okay, good.
No, you don't have to lie.
We did it last time, but I do think though that there would be value in it. I think we could integrate that into subsequent
That's
reporting.
good. I mean,
That'd
that
be a
was
good idea.
the answer I was fishing for. I do have a couple other things while I have the floor. There's a chart on page 5 of the board packet. It's this funny one with the skinny bars that shows ETHS growth on the PSAT to the SAT. Do you see that one? ETHS growth, yeah, none of those. That one.
That one.
Okay, so what struck me in looking at this, I do love a bar graph. I did not get joy out of math in high school like it appears almost all of my fellow board members here, except for a few rare exceptions. In fact, it gave me nightmares, so the idea of picturing myself as a mathematician never entered my head. But here I am asking you questions about this bar graph. What struck me looking at this is that the red and the green are pretty big areas, and that tiny little bit of orange in the middle is quite small. And I thought, well, that's sort of interesting that we have this large chunk of green where people are meeting or exceeding the benchmarks. And we have this pretty large section of our population that needs to strengthen skills. But the tiniest little bit is approaching the benchmark. I don't know if that's just where the numbers are set, or if in fact our biggest challenge is really not even getting our red to green, but getting our red into the orange territory.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you can enlighten me a little there.
Yeah, what we're looking at is distributions around the benchmark. So what that indicates is that, yeah, there's fewer students in that, just a little bit shy. So that could be, when you're in that territory, especially when it's that narrow, I mean, that's just a couple questions probably. But when you get to the red, you're talking about some substantive gaps in background knowledge around mathematical concepts in this case, 'cause that's what we were really looking at. But we actually have reports that dive into that. When we go in, we see that we've talked about it before, those were primarily algebra. And as Dale spoke to, at one point, we didn't even get kids to algebra by the time they were juniors. But now we're able to do that. So my hope is that we will have more orange. I would like to see more orange in terms of a distribution.
To me that as much as I would love to move some orange into the green, really, if our goal is to lift all of our kids, the focus, the priority, whatever needs to be on the red, and how to get them at least to orange and then ultimately to the green. I mean, is that fair? And that should drive some decision making around resources and how we do things.
Exactly. That's part of what we're doing structurally too, what Dale has highlighted. So, yep.
Okay, one last just little clarification. In the packet on page 4, there's a chart. It's map meeting expected gains K2, 3, 5, 6, 8. And it comes a couple pages before this. I don't know who's controlling the clicker. Page 4 in the packet. No, it is. Maybe it's not on the slide. Okay, so here's my question, and this is where I became confused because our packet didn't include any of these slides.
Right.
Our packet, there's like 3, 4 slides here. And these appear to be the blowout of the one that's in our packet. Is that a fair statement? I'm sort of, not that one. Not the test percentiles so much. Yeah, the maps. This one, and then go to the red and blue one that's not in our packet.
The red and blue one I think, if I'm following, I believe you're talking about.
There we go.
growth.
That's really the one. That one, that one breaks out what's not shown in the packet, and it gives us the racial subgroup performance over a span of 5 years, right?
Well, that's by race.
That's what I just said. This is, thanks, Joey, but let me hear it from him.
So this is showing all grades and is highlighting by race. And the one you're referring to that we don't have in the deck, but if we looked into the packet, what we'd see is we were teasing it out by grade bands. I believe
It was
that's what
just
you're referring
grade
to.
bands, right?
Correct.
But those are connected.
It's the same metric
But
with different views,
the colors
correct?
don't bear any relationship to this.
No.
Yeah,
no.
this is, it's a bar graph in the packet. The green corresponds with a year.
Correct,
Not a
correct,
race.
correct,
Just to clarify a little bit.
correct. The reason we put that in the packet is we really wanted to see the massive growth in those primary grades, going back to the previous, part of the previous conversation, building a foundation, is that we're seeing, you can see if you look in the packet, you'd see that 80% of our students in K2 are making expected gains. So we wanted to have that in the packet.
Right. And then, to go back, somebody else was making a point earlier about the terrible, Mira, it was you. It was the section on the SAT results for grade 11, where it only shows 12.4% of our black students meeting standards. I just, to the point that a lot of this goes, Nicole's left, but goes back, all the way back to kindergarten and before. Even the results from grades 6 through 8 show only 10.8% of our black students at proficiency on the IAR math test. So,
That's in the pack.
and that is in the packet.
Yeah.
And that is on page 4. Anyway, just to hammer the point, which we all know.
So this, can I ask, are you done? So this particular graph, because it's grades 1 through 8, just seems like such a wide span. Do you have it broken down by grade level?
We do. We gave a glimpse of that in that packet part. I think depending how deep down the rabbit hole you want to look, you can start to look at grade band and race at the same time. And so we had to stop at some point for tonight. But, if there's further inquiries, we're happy to.
I guess I would like to see, I don't know.
I'd say
So we
ditto.
do have, that data is in, so we did a recent data report for our school board, the EPI update, which I think was last month. And so there's an appendix there that's approximately 40 to 50 pages that breaks all this winter down by race and demographic. And so we do have that available, just not in this packet.
Okay, all right. So how can I get that? You
I
send it
think,
to
I
me?
think it's the January 22nd board meeting, and it's public, it's on our website, just for easy access.
Okay, thank you.
And it's called the EPI report. It's where our district leadership team presented to our school board an analysis and roll-up of our data in all areas. So you'll be able to see that too. You'll be able to see also the early literacy data, the early childhood data that Dr. Beardsley referred to as well as in that packet.
Okay, good. Thank you.
If I could also be so bold to say that, we offered a spirit of collaboration, and we have a data sharing agreement. So as inquiries are made, we want to work together to discover the truth. So, I think that's, if whatever is in there, great. And if there's more questions that we have as a group, I think collectively we need to dive in together to find those answers.
Great, thank you, thank you. Okay, board, other questions? All right, this was awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay, I move that the Board of Education accept the recommendations outlined in the attached group motion and approve the personnel appointments, leaves, and separations, January 2024 Board of Education meeting minutes, destruction of January 2022 closed session recordings and review of meeting minutes, and the December 2023 list of bills, treasurer's report, and budget amendments.
Second.
Okay, so we've obviously
Maria?
moved to District 65.
Maria, she needs to just do a roll call. Can you do a roll call, please?
I know.
Yes.
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 Okay, what I was just saying is, we've obviously moved to District 65 action items. That's where we are, just so that we all know where we are. Okay, so you just did the first one? So, is that it? Okay, now we are at District 202, information and action items. And the first item we have is information on a FOIA. Dr. Bavis?
Yeah, we have a FOIA from Zimmerman, and it's in your packet.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good. You projected. FOIA from Zimmerman, and it's in our packet. All right, so action items. The first item is approval of press policy. Wait, oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one, yes. International travel for 2024-25. There's a memo in our packet. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, the next item is approval of press policy number 13. And there's 113. That includes the approval of the press policy as well as the draft policy that we discussed. Policy number 430, review and investments, and policy number 4.70, sustainability, and policy number 5.12, personnel, technology, and social media usage and conduct.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Oh, yes, sorry. Somebody was coughing at the precise
Yes.
moment you called my name.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, the next item is the consent agenda, which includes approval of NIIPC Cooperative Joint Agreement, approval of bills, and the personnel report.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes. All right. We are ready to adjourn.
Thank you. Again, I just want to thank our colleagues before we adjourn for having us here. It's always a joy to be here with you all. And congratulations to having a climate policy here at the high school.
Yes.
And without no further business for District 65, I adjourn District 65 at 9:18 p.m.
Could we have a motion
I
for
move we
adjournment?
adjourn.
Okay, so our meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you so much.